So I think there's a lot of healing and sort of the greater teaching of Neptune, the prayer and the hope is the dissolving of these artificial divisions and boundaries of your people, my people, and there's a different way of living where we maintain the distinction of our unique culture,
Yeah.
but we're not in fear, and that's the ultimate, the only inevitable movement of all of this, I feel.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I hope that after these tough times, I don't know what the next decade or cycle will hold for us, but maybe towards the end, this strong definitions, the exclusionist ideologies, I call them, would prove to fail.
Hmm.
And people will see how dangerous they are and how bloodshed or how like unjust they are to humanity, and we go beyond them,
Yeah.
or we prove them as a failure, or they prove themselves as failing, and maybe then we go beyond that. So that's the hope, I guess.
Yeah,
But we
me
have to
too.
go through the conjunction first.
Hello, everyone. This is Ari Moshe Wolf of Heart and Soul Centered Astrology. I'm here today with my dear friend Diana. Diana is an evolutionary astrologer from Ramallah in Palestine. And this is a conversation that we've been talking about having for a very long time. And we're finally doing it on the cusp of Saturn entering into Aries and the final Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries as well. So, Diana, thank you for joining me. And I'll just speak a few words just to introduce you in this topic, and then I'll just let you, jump in. I really have a deep respect for Diana's wisdom and insight, both astrological and also her larger historical perspective and understanding of what is happening in Israel and Palestine. What this talk is going to be focused on is understanding the current Saturn-Neptune cycle from the perspective of where are we coming from. So she'll be speaking about the last time they came together, which was in Capricorn in 1989, 1990, what was happening there, and also she'll also be speaking to the larger context of what were the historical developments prior to then, leading to that point. And one thing that you've done, Diana, which I think is just really insightful, is you've done a lot of research into the Saturn-Neptune conjunctions over several different periods of time, way back into the 1700s when they were last together in Aries. So it would be awesome for you to speak to that as well as providing some context. Now, we have, I'll put in the description 2 talks that Diana made with the EA Zoom channel. One talk was about, I think it was the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries in the 1700s. And the other was similar to what we're addressing now. We're probably going to have a little more in-depth discussion and sort of unpacking the evolutionary dynamics, but it was a talk given on the history of the Saturn-Neptune dynamic from 89-90 leading to now. So yeah, Diana, take it away. Is there anything else you want to add as you want to introduce today's talk?
I just want to thank you for having me, for offering me this opportunity. So I thank you a lot. I mean, this cause, this issue means a lot for both of us. I mean, and it's really important to talk about it in the context of a Saturn and Neptune, because it's very much one of the issues that it seems to be like moving within this cycle, like it's affected with this cycle. So it's unfortunately, and so yeah, we can
And I'll say,
maybe speak to that
there's
later.
so much to unpack with Saturn and Neptune, and this is one important dimension of it. So I want to invite everyone to really consider this talk to be a very essential education. You're going to learn a lot of astrology, really gain some larger perspective and insight, and you're going to learn some history and context. I think this will be very valuable for just understanding what's going on in the larger sense and being able to relate it to the astrology. So yeah, take your time with this talk, and feel free to ask your questions in the comments, anything that you want to understand more clearly, and yeah, let's make this a good learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, Diana, let's take it away.
Yeah. So I think I will be like doing the same things that I did in both of my talks, which is kind of look on the real things going on the ground, like the reality of this issue. And me being here on the ground is a very like very particular perspective because it's the Palestinian sort of perspective, which is doesn't get a lot of attention or yeah. And so, and then taking that and looking at the archetype instead of just taking the archetypes and the way we think of them and then trying to find sort of correlations with that. So I'll stay true to that, I think.
Great.
So what I find fascinating is that with the last cycle, which was the last time both Neptune and Saturn met in 89, was the Oslo Accords like occurred 2 years into that as a result of what happened in 89. So in 89 there was a conjunction, and as I mentioned in one of my speak, is that there was a huge regional event that took place, which is the Iraq War. So immediately, maybe we can have a look at the chart as well. This is like the conjunction that took place in 89. We all know that the conjunctions like meet on 3 times, separate times. So this is one on the 20th of February. This is the exact conjunction in Capricorn. And then the date, the 2nd of August, is the date when this big regional event took place. So by the time they separated Neptune and Saturn, we have this big regional event, which is the invasion of the Iraq into Kuwait. And then we all know we had the Iraq War. We have two desert storms. The first one where the United States invaded Iraq finally. So we have this huge regional context, the huge regional war that took place. And for us, for Palestinians, what came out of that context is the Oslo Accords. So shortly after that, I think we have this is the Madrid conference. So this is the Oslo Accords. Yes, it's on a Neptune-Uranus conjunction, but this immediately was the result of this larger context that we have, which is this regional war and the events about it. And I explain it more in the talk, which is why peace failed, because it was the presentation where I discussed what happened. And so I move more slowly, explain how did that come about. And the interesting stuff is that just
And will you
yesterday,
explain what the Oslo Accords were?
yes, the Oslo Accords are the peace agreements that took place between the Israelis and the Palestinians. So that was in 90. I'd have the date on top, but I don't see it over here. It's exactly on 93. So that's when the Palestinians were allowed to have some form of representation. As Palestinians, we were allowed to have political representation in a form of a government, and we had our president in the picture, Yasser Arafat, who came back from exile, and he was allowed to enter the West Bank and have a government. Some people or families also were allowed to return to Palestine from outside Palestine, and we had a government. Um, and so we had some legal authorities, some administrative authorities, but also we had a police and we have security forces. So some form of entities and political institutions were constructed for the sake of us having someday or one day a Palestinian state next to the Israeli state. And so we assumed that there was peace that began at that time between Israelis and Palestinians.
And was the assumption then in the signing of the Oslo Accords that there would be that Palestine would become a sovereign state, right? That it
Yes.
would that it would become equal to that of Israel, meaning a recognized state. It would have its own fully functioning government, its own sovereignty, all that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yes, of course. And that was the dream. Everyone was excited. Um, it was really good times back then where both sides believed that this was possible, that finally this is the resolution. This could represent the beginning of the resolution of this long, century-long conflict or struggle between the two sides. And so I see this signing as very much connected to the cycle of the 89 cycle, because what happened then, the regional war, was connected, but also internationally, because then the United States became the sole authority in the world, like because the Soviet Union collapsed, right,
In
in
89, yeah.
around that
Yeah.
cycle. And so the United States became really the biggest international sort of authority of the whole, and it could move any issues or causes forward. And so at that time it was Clinton. These two we were brought together onto the table, and so it was like the first few years were very hopeful years.
Okay.
Okay.
So and I want you to follow your flow, but definitely where I'm deeply curious, and I think where a lot of my listeners would appreciate is getting some background. So even before jumping into 1989, 1990, if you feel like this works for you, to give some historical context to what was happening before then. Like, what is the whole, what has been the struggle of Palestinian people and sovereignty and statehood and their sense of, Saturn being ethnicity, Saturn being state, Saturn being boundaries and borders. There's a lot of history and context there. Do you feel like it would make sense to go over some of the earlier charts prior to 1989?
Um, Well, I mean, it's whoever is interested in more details,
Yeah.
because I explained that very much. But I mean, what was
Okay.
prior to the, oh, I mean, I can sort of summarize it if you want right now. But what was going before the Oslo Accords was the First Intifada. And I explain a lot about the First Intifada, how it was a very non-violent form of um, demonstrations. We called it popular uprising. Popular meaning massive amounts of people being involved on all levels, sort of a non-violent resistance, where we were demanding political representation. So the basic, look, the very simplified version of what Palestinians want is a a political representation on this land as Palestinian people, as an ethnicity, as a nationality. So not only do we want it to exist with only civil liberties, of course we want that because we don't have that. We don't have our civil rights, not yet. We don't have, for example, the freedom of movement. Not only as an viably economic sort of group of people, we also want political representation. That has always been the case. We want to exist as a state. We want to continue as well to exist as a population in connection to this land. So, Palestinians, generally speaking, we don't have an issue with Jewish communities being connected to this land under biblical beliefs or under national beliefs. But our problem is with the claim that we should be removed from this land because we do not have any connection. Palestinians consider that our ancestors for thousands of years have existed on this land and that we have a right to exist in whatever way we defined ourselves. And we define ourselves like most nations in the 1940s, which is around the time that we have another cycle, Neptune, Saturn cycle, where most of the countries around the Middle East gained their independence and wanted their nationality to be defined within the borders of what we call now the countries. And so we wanted a country called Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
and we never had it. There was Israel that was constructed. Instead, there was an English a colonial mandate by the English colonial entity at the empire at that time. And then, well, that's more for the history, but that's what our struggle consisted of throughout the years. And that began from the 40s, from the 30s, from even in the 80s. In this, like every 10 years, there is a way where we have decided to go ahead and demand our political representation and our existence to be sort of solidified in a form of a political state. And the state is usually it will be multi-religious and multi-ethnic. Like this is the natural formula that we have in Palestine, and that has always existed in Palestine. Like even from the Ottoman Empire all throughout, like the early century, like 20th centuries, we've always had all religions and all ethnicities. I mean, this is the Middle East. Like it has always been, especially this part of the Middle East, this has always been multi-religious and multi-ethnic. And so, um, like that's a very long summary, I guess, of
No, I think, listen,
what and
I think it's
prior,
important. So,
yeah,
I mean,
and
what
prior
I
to
want to
Oslo,
summarize, what's that?
yes,
Or what I
I was
want to
just going to say that
go for it.
prior to Oslo, we had the Intifada for 2 years in '87 that wanted that. And the leadership, sort of the leadership under Yasser Arafat, who was in the picture, was we were trying to demand such representation. Yeah.
So this is what I want to emphasize. I mean, I just want to make sure everyone is just has a basic. I think a lot of people just don't really understand the basic history and context. So there, for a long time, in conjunction with the formation and movement towards the formation of an Israeli state, the Palestinian people have been underrepresented. It have not really been in a position to have the kind of support and momentum to establish their own sovereignty. And what I want to somehow get us to 1989 in the beginning of this last conjunction, and spend a lot of time really just unpacking like what was happening then. So what was happening? You mentioned the Intifada, how it started as a predominantly nonviolent movement.
Yeah. I have
And
the chart of the
yes,
Intifada if
please,
you want me to go back.
yeah, go for
It's
it,
just
please. I think it'd be really good to just go and as much as you can give us maps and show. You have all that prepared here, so people can really understand, even visually see what we're looking at, what we're seeing here.
yeah, so that's the
So
yeah, so
this
that's
is the
the
time.
chart.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's when the Intifada began on the in December, like 1988.
So
And
approaching the Saturn
so
Neptune.
yes, just prior to that. And
Hmm.
so there was an incident that took place in Gaza, in a refugee camp in Gaza. It was very like there was death involved. Like there were workers, and these workers were there was an incident of hit and run. Some soldiers sort of ran over these workers, and it was just like unexpected and undesigned, but it was an incident that happened, and it erupted just all over the West Bank. And there were massive protests all over the West Bank, and that continued for 2 years until until the Oslo Accords. That continued, but that took there were terms to that during the Iraq invasion into Kuwait. I speak more towards that in the presentation, and yeah, I really invite people to go and listen because I can
It
speak
was
more to that. But
deeply
I
in depth.
mean,
Oh, I lost my camera.
oh.
As long as you can hear me, we're solid.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but if you want me to explain, if you wanted to connect it to today's events, because something interesting happened in these past couple of days in this cycle, but it depends on where do you want to steer this or
Well,
take this
I want to
if
go
you're
slow, and so coming
yes.
back to 1989. Just get my
Hmm.
camera back on.
Yes.
What I would love for you to explain is the development of what began. So when we look at Saturn, Neptune, in particular in Capricorn, you're looking at the security of your borders, of your ethnicity, of your race, of your culture. There can be a deep sense of Saturn, Neptune, of vulnerability, of we're unprotected. There's no ground, there's no stability, there's no structure. But it also then creates the formation of a sort of nationalistic radicalization. And this is, I think, a really important thing to understand. So Will you speak to the Islamic Brotherhood, the formation of Hamas, and kind of how Hamas came into power, really starting in 1989, what was beginning to develop there, especially as the movement became more violent and violent elements began to creep in? I think this is a very important thing to understand, because this is, as I understand, really began around then, but
Yes.
it wasn't like it before then. Like we weren't there weren't suicide bombings and these, there wasn't a strong violent faction of Palestinian resistance prior to this period. And I think this is a really important context for us to understand, and sort of the radicalization of different movements and groups that, while that's happened amongst Palestinian people, it also really began to happen in a significantly strong way amongst more Jewish people, where you also began to see the increase of sort of settler extremist mentality, sort of nationalistic entitlement, which is, again, that's a big part of what happens with Saturn Neptune. So are you open to speaking more to this context?
Yes, yes, of course. The Intifada that began in 88 all the way to the Oslo Accords, especially the Intifada, was a non-violent one, extremely non-violent one. It was a lot about civil disobedience,
Mm.
sort of like boycotting even the schools, because the schools were even controlled by by the military. So we even boycotted the schools. We boycotted the Israeli products. We began growing vegetables in the gardens.
Oh, wow.
We began formulating committees within the neighborhoods to form like alternative schooling system, alternative ways of growing food, of securing our neighborhoods. So it was a massive sort of boycott movement, a non-cooperation movement, trying to establish what we wanted without the with in protest to this military rule that we're having. We even they were burning of the identity cards. We had Israeli
Wow.
identity cards. We burned them. So it was that we boycotted taxes. We did not pay taxes because we paid taxes, but to the Israeli military. So to the Israeli administration compound that exists in each city and sort of manage the cities.
Huh.
So that was the form. But I have to be honest that during the 70s, there were armed resistance or violent sort of forms of resistance. And it took form, if you there's a so I looking at the context in the 70s, so we did resort to violence in the 70s, the Palestinians in their fighting. So it did take several shapes. And in the 70s, if you go back and research about the Palestinian resistance in the 70s, so there were acts of violence. I mean, this is part of history that we have to acknowledge as Palestinians. We had both violent and non-violent forms of resistance, but not in the First Intifada, because that came as a result of, us learning the value of non-violent resistance. And so this is why you find that form of like coming around into that form of nonviolent resistance. However, so there were always elements in the Palestinian society that argued for the need to resist using arms. And international law allows people to use whatever means possible to defend their own rights. So anyway, so there's always this controversy that existed in Palestinian sort of argument, or in most of our history, but not during the 80s. So that decade, there wasn't a lot. And the way I see Hamas entering into the picture immediately after the First Intifada is that kind of rhetoric or that kind of division. The way I envisioned it and the way I explained it in my presentation is a fragmentation of in identity.
Mm.
Like the way we defined ourselves as Palestinians up until the moment when Hamas came into the field was we were more national, meaning we agreed on us being Palestinians, being multi-ethnic and being multi-religious, right? the way when Hamas entered the picture, and when they entered the picture, the whole militant Islam and the whole political Islam was new to the region as well.
Interesting.
Because it's good to understand and remember and to connect this to world events. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it collapsed because Russia left Afghanistan. It was defeated in Afghanistan. And the way it was defeated in Afghanistan was through militant Islam, the jihadists in Afghanistan. And so that was used, that was fueled, this identity and this political tool was also fueled and used in other places.
So there's a sort of like a strengthening and propping of the Islamic militant
and the theology,
yeah,
and the theology of it.
Yeah.
There was a strengthening of it, and there was a very clear attempt and agenda to Islamize all of the societies around the Middle East. And we can see that very clearly. I mean, just walking in the streets in the 80s, in any Middle Eastern cities is very different when you come now and walk in the cities of any Middle Eastern cities. We have a lot of more veiled women. We have a lot of, the religion is very much strongly part of how this younger generation is viewing themselves. So the Islamization of societies along the Middle East was very strong since that moment, since that Neptune Saturn conjunction, which is in 1989, and the fall of the Soviet Union, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. So that sort of international context is very important for the Middle East, because this is how it all started. This is how the Islamization started. And so just like everywhere else in the Middle East, we had an offshoot of that political Islam identification. So there was not just these Islamic groups, they have a social agenda and a political agenda, and they coexist together. And so, as an attempt to weaken the national identity of the Palestinians, which existed throughout the 60s, 70s, and the 80s, was very strong, and we were more inclusive of multiple ethnicities and religions, as a way to break that or to interrupt that. Islamization came in. Some say it's intentional, some say it's not intentional. Some people argue that this was intentional, meaning that there was an agenda to do that, to weaken the national view of the way we defined ourselves as societies in the Middle East. And so there comes in Hamas in the Palestinian society, and Hamas has a social agenda as well as a political agenda of liberation. However, just like all of the Islamic groups in the Middle East, they define themselves around religion, not multi-ethnicities. So they're more they emphasize the importance of being a Muslim, the way you live, Islam being the higher form of religion that should be prevalent. So less tolerant towards the other ethnicities and the other religions in the region and the other forms of lifestyles.
So can I jump in with a reflection? I mean, so this is exactly the nuance I think is so fascinating here. To me, that's so emblematic of, is that the right word, of Saturn Neptune?
Yeah.
The culture, Saturn, being more inclusive, meaning less radicalized, less polarized, right? And it's almost like the vulnerability that comes with sort of a nation being unsupported or unanchored in a sense of sovereignty creates a vacuum for something like the radicalization, Islamic radicalization, to then come in.
Yes.
And I think we can see this, I mean, currently in many places in the world, but that's a really good example. And so, this becomes a source of identity. This represents me, but it also makes a sort of Neptunian homogenization. Everyone has to become a part of this. And I think this is where it's a part of this increasing polarization that we then really do begin to see, because it's no longer then the sense of we just want to exist and be sovereign, but we don't have an issue with you, the more radicalized Islamic orientation has much more of an agenda. And I remember you describing to me once that a part of the Islamic Brotherhood orientation is to return to Ottoman Empire borders,
Yes,
which is
yeah,
something that not a lot of people understand. Like, it's not just about, a Palestinian state. It's actually like, let's return the entire land to an Islamic place, which then
yes,
becomes innately, there's a much more violent and exclusive orientation than really the original Palestinian cause of, like, we just want to live here and have our identity. I
yes,
think that's a very important nuance to understand, and in
yeah.
particular, as Hamas becomes more and more powerful, this becomes more of a social persona or identity that's then projected onto the Palestinian people.
Exactly. Yes. And it's in essence, it's less tolerant. There's not, I mean, not the, I mean, this is not to portray Islam as non-tolerant. It's this jihadist
Yeah,
understanding and
absolutely.
interpretation. And I think we need to get back to this point because this is what we see also in the Israeli side as well. That's like, I think we will be touching upon that just slowly because it's not a condemnation of Islam itself, but it's that kind of
Absolutely.
interpretation of Islam, which is very, in my opinion, in my view, very radical. And it's one form of interpretation. It's the jihadist interpretation. And it was used because it was useful to disintegrate the Soviet Union. So that form of belief was useful. And so I think there was an agenda somehow to spread that throughout the Middle East and
Can I say
use
one
it.
more thing? It's like that
Yes.
mentality. It's almost like I can trust you more. I can trust the radical movement, and I can see this just as much on the Jewish, like, Israeli radicalism, just as much as currently we can see that in more conservative radical movements here in the U.S. I
Yeah.
think a lot of what's in part is, I can trust you more because you're gonna really stand up and fight. You're really representing and doing something about this larger cause. There's something about the Saturn Neptune, how then it distills a sense of displaced trust in these symbols of nationhood and ethnicity that become a representation for some sort of larger political, social agenda and movement that becomes a source of ultimate meaning. Because it's like it's where the extremism itself becomes a proxy for a deeper sense of hopelessness and despair. It's like, well, here these people are engaged. They believe in this, and look at us. We're not getting anywhere. So I just really want to emphasize that point that we see with Saturn Neptune, the introduction of these mass movements that want to inspire entire nations, entire ethnicities, entire groups of people to become identified with this, like, singular homogenized sense of identity, because it gives them
Exactly.
faith and meaning where there's otherwise been a deep sense of despair, even if those sources of meaning are deeply deeply misguided, and not in alignment at their core. So I just wanted to offer that
Exactly.
perspective.
It's true. It's like that's what it represented. It's just like one form of existence. Like that's what's
Mm.
allowed.
Yes.
In a way, that's Neptune, right? But it's dissolving the differentiation, which is very important um, for me. What represents the higher end of Neptune or Neptunian sort of I don't know, that unified vision is actually a very mosaic painting. If you imagine
Mm.
a mosaic painting, it's all these little pieces that come and form a unified image. For me, that's like the higher end of Neptune, and in a very deformed or distorted way of, when we have this marriage between Neptune and Saturn, we have this, what you just mentioned. It's this a group of people that have like there's one way you can understand religion and that's our way and then nothing else is allowed to exist, and this is what I don't know if people who listen to news, this is what we're having in Syria
Mm.
at the moment. There's a lot of sectarian conflict. I mean, I don't want to like digress a lot, but that's what's unfortunately what's taking place. It's like one form of religion is trying to overcome
Mm.
any other forms of existence and religions. And in essence, the Middle East is not that. It can never be that and has never been that. There's always been a mosaic of multiple religions and ethnic, I mean, throughout history.
Yeah.
So, and that's the deformation that unfortunately Hamas and the other more radical Islamic groups that have entered the scene, they came here and they defined themselves in one way. And so there was never unity under the flag of the Palestinian leadership between these Islamic groups and the organization, which is the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It was called PLO, then it became the Palestinian Authorities. There was never a way to come in and define ourselves in one way. And this is how I view it, as the fragmented
Yeah.
division or definitions of, well, they came into the scene and that's what happened.
Okay,
Um,
so
Yeah, let me just see if trying to. So that's the this is one slide that I have in my presentation where we can see on an exact Neptune, but also we have Uranus in the image back in the 80s,
yeah,
where there, I mean, that was the first time it happened. What year was that? I don't see it because I have this.
1989.
Yeah, in 89.
Really?
So that's it happened, and then that was like one incident, and it was like a very foreshadowing incident of where we're heading. And then the number of suicide bombs multiplied um, after the Oslo Accords
Okay.
because they did not want, they wanted to disrupt the peace process. Let me say that.
Yes,
Like that
yes.
was partly the agenda of what was happening. They wanted to disrupt the peace process. So there were people, parts of groups, Palestinian groups that wanted to disrupt this peace process. And I think also in the Israeli side, we had incidents, and I did mention
Deeply,
that
yeah.
in my presentation of,
Well, can I share a thought on this? I mean,
yes.
I think this is really something that really began to be initiate in '89, and we see what's progressed. It's like where there becomes sort of an increasing homogenization of identity, and not everyone joined that, but we see that polarization beginning. I remember as a young Jewish boy growing up in a very strong Jewish culture, a very strong Zionistic culture where Israel is idealized as your home. I visited there many times, and I have many family and relatives there. Learning about these suicide bombings, and even just looking at that picture, like, brings up emotion and grief for me, because there's a memory of that and the sense of like,
Yeah.
this is family, right? But
Yeah.
growing up with this instilled sense of two things, and this is really important for us to understand relative to Saturn Neptune.
Yeah.
I was then taught that my security as a Jew is always threatened. So there's a vulnerability. Saturn, Neptune, there's vulnerability. We can't be protected. We're not secure enough ever. And Saturn, Neptune, Palestinian people are dangerous. And as we saw the increase of Hamas violence, that also coincided with this sort of homogenized view of Palestinian people. And honestly, because there's a lack of knowledge, Arab people in general, like for me, it's like, I don't know what the difference was, right? Like, it's sort of the same.
Yeah.
They're violent, they're scary. And I remember just like seeing an Arab person in the streets in Israel, that would freak me out. I would become actually terrified. And I think that instillation of fear is a part of what we really began. I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that fear and that sort of like, oh, you're a violent person, you're a scary person, existed in the Israeli psyche prior to this time, but nor that indoctrination of, oh, you can't trust a Palestinian, they'll kill you. But I think that indoctrination and that perception really began to grow and develop, and that's why, you mentioned earlier, there's a perspective that perhaps many people wanted Hamas to become more prominent in order to further that polarization, which then justifies more protection, more defense, and keeps the peace process at bay. The one thing you mentioned is, after the Oslo Accords, on both sides, there was strong resistance to there being any kind of peace process, because the Hamas movement did not want to ultimately. They did not want peace. They're not about sharing the land, and the right-wing Israeli settlers as well. They were not about sharing the land. They wanted it all. And so it's like, as the movement towards peace grew, there became an increasing polarization, and thus an increasing homogenization of ethnicity and identity. as more and more people were resistant to that. And I think that's a really important thing to understand about the Saturn Neptune process.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good point what you're mentioning here because as I was growing up, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, right? I remember the time when I saw Israelis in our cities, even under occupation, Israeli citizens or civilians, plus soldiers. I mean, I grew up with Israelis or Jews being soldiers, but still, we were able to see also civilians because I was able to go to Jerusalem, for example. I was able to go to Jaffa.
That's an
I was
important thing
able
for
to
us
go
to
to Tel
learn.
Aviv. There wasn't this borders, strong borders that were erupted. I remember when I was a little girl, I used to accompany my father. My father used to go driving the car, that's unbelievable right now,
Mm.
to Israelis because the way we did business or trade was we buy our stuff. I mean, we don't have independence. So when we buy stuff, we buy it from Israelis traders and we sell them in our cities. This is how occupation is, right? But I used to go with my father and I used to sit with an Israeli elder man and I used to see them as, I'm going to use this word, as normal people. So we would sit and my father would talk to him. So that's in the 70s and in the 80s, it was normal for both people to interact and see each other. As soldiers, there were less soldiers and the occupation was less violent and it became more violent until now it's genocidal. As these events took place, the suicide bombings, there were checkpoints erupted. We were forbidden to move into the Israeli cities, and then there was the wall. Now, my children, I think my children, my two boys, never met an Israeli ever.
Oh my
They
God,
don't have
it's crazy.
I don't think they've ever met. I mean, you have a whole generation, and I think it's the same for the Israelis. You have a whole generation of Palestinian children were born after the 2000s, or what do you call them? The Gen Zs, or
I have
yeah.
no clue.
I have no clue. They have never met a civilian Israeli. The only thing they know is soldiers, and now
Soldiers. Wow.
being in front of an Israeli soldiers is highly dangerous because I mean now shooting a Palestinian is the easiest thing, and like
Mm.
there's no accountability to shooting any Palestinian, even if it's innocent. So as time progressed and as unfortunately the violence increased, I mean it's the cycle of colonization in
Yeah.
it just becomes more and more violent, and that's when it's the silver lining. Silver lining is that's when the end is near. But the more walls and borders were built, we were we did not we as both societies were not able to see each other as humans. So
Will you
the
please share a couple of the
dehumanization
maps?
began. Sorry?
Will you share a couple of the maps so everyone can kind of see
Yes.
the
Yes,
context?
sure. Let
Break it
me,
down.
yeah. Do you want the map of, yes, I have it over here, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe this map first?
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and then we have maybe the other map where that we show the settlements where the settlers are.
Yeah.
So, um, the blue areas are where Israel is. So now we have a whole generation that has never met a civilian on the other side. And so I think you have a whole generation where as borders became very, very strong, the dehumanization is easier. The demonization is easier. And this is where you get the fear increasing. But I remember the time when even the Israeli soldiers, I mean, when I was during the First Intifada, even the Israeli soldiers who entered homes and arrested people, sometimes we would have a discussion, a political discussion with them.
Mm.
It was less dangerous. The whole atmosphere was. So there was time where there was moments where there was a human interaction even between a soldier. So we were where we were able as Palestinians to go beyond the uniform of a soldier and to meet the human behind the uniform. And I think maybe some of the soldiers were able, as they came into our homes, to see that. I hope, or maybe We have stories of that. But as things become more and more dangerous and like more at stake with these suicide bombings, and it's not just the suicide bombings because the violence also increased from the Israeli side because now there were airplanes and helicopters in the Second Intifada. It just became a lot more violent. Meeting an Israeli soldiers is very, very dangerous right now, even from a distance.
Mm.
So, unfortunately,
Mm.
that's what we are having.
The more sequestered you can make a group of people or an ethnicity, the less you will know them, and then the easier it is for them to become this homogenized idea or concept. And so the fact that we're now in a situation which really developed over the past 37 years or so since the last Saturn Neptune, where you have two people that really don't know each other. You know, I actually lived in the West Bank on an illegal settlement when I was in my early 20s, so just miles from where you lived. um, but there's, and
I'm gonna,
I was a
I
shepherd.
want to shift,
Yeah,
sorry, I want to shift to this, oh, what, okay,
yeah.
sorry.
There, that the other map. Yeah, but like even on that little settlement, I was in my own little bubble. I
Yeah,
would see, Palestinian people, but no interact. And then the roads. I would love for you to kind of show the map and explain the roads,
yeah,
just to really
yes,
understand how this works. I think this is
this
the
one,
one, right?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is where we're, yeah. So, this is a very also there's definitely a Saturn theme. So this is what the Oslo Accord produced. It produced an agreement. So this is the West Bank. You see it. It looks like a shape of a bean or something. And the Oslo Accords produced, unfortunately, something called Areas A, Areas B, Areas C,
Mm.
and the B are the gray ones, which are the villages and area A, the cities. So we only have the red dots of where like the Palestinian communities exist. And beyond that, really, we don't have a lot of Palestinian communities existing. And areas C. And so
What's C?
these areas C are the green, the light green
Well, what does
ones.
it correspond to?
It corresponds. Well, it's also the villages.
Okay.
It's also the land where most of the land is the agricultural land, the water resources as well. So it's just the spread of the land because the cities are just cities. You know, you have buildings and apartments and like commercial concentrations and of areas, and that's all. So it's. I mean I mean, there's a political agreement to what each area represents, and we're supposed to move into a Palestinian state in this area where it's more geographically connected. But now it's very much geographically disconnected, where we have even the roads connecting one red dot, for example, Ramallah, going to Nablus, is now blocked. It's blocked with settlements in between and roads that only connect settlements. So there are roads, for example, if I'm traveling from this red dot Ramallah, the city where I live, to Nablus, this is just a 45-minute drive. But we have areas where there's no connectivity because of the settlements in between,
I'm
because
looking
of the
for a map right now of
connectivity.
Israeli settlements just to provide some context
I
for
think I
this.
have one, but
Oh,
I
do you
have
want?
to. I have, but not in this slide. So maybe if you want me to go and do I have one? I think in one of the presentations. Um, I'm not sure really.
Here, I have a good one right
If
here.
you have one, yeah, maybe it's better
Yeah,
if
let's look at this. Yeah,
I'll
I'll
share
share
it.
this.
Yeah.
Because a part of what Diana's saying is, yeah, these isolated major cities, but it's progressively becoming increasingly hard to leave. Like you said, when you're younger, you could travel to Israel proper and buy stuff with your father. This is becoming increasingly hard. So maybe you can sort of unpack this a little bit for us. Well, it's too
Yeah.
close.
It's really unfortunate because to bring the whole conversation into today's, to link the cycle that began with the Oslo Accords in the well, within the cycle, the previous cycle of Saturn Neptune, to bring it to a closure, what happened actually like yesterday was there was a bunch of rules that were approved or regulations measures that were approved by the Israeli cabinet that actually ends the Oslo Accords. It puts it to an end completely. So this is
So
as
the current
Saturn
Israeli
is,
government is highly right, highly politically extreme,
yes.
and it resonates with a lot of the violent factions that have even, actively, openly celebrated, killed Palestinian people, that have this sort
Yes.
of very extreme religious mentality to take the entire land. And it's really important that everyone understands that
Yes.
there are things happening besides for Gaza in the West Bank, in the gradual seizure of more land and making it increasingly harder for Palestinians to even leave. There's a gradual, complete annexation. So, so you're saying that the agreement recently amongst the Israeli cabinet has been to reject the Oslo Accords.
Literally, what the decisions that were
Just
approved.
happened.
Yeah, like yesterday there were reports about it, and we are just sort of like waking up to it in the West Bank. Literally, it ends the Oslo Accords. Why? Because as we see Gaza being completely destroyed and desecrated,
Yeah.
we have not just areas like there was gradual destruction of areas in the West Bank, so not as loud as bombing, but using bulldozers, using tractors. So we have complete neighborhoods and cities completely destroyed, just like a Gaza inside the West Bank, inside the areas of B and C that I highlighted. But what happened yesterday is that these regulations that were approved actually allow for even it changed the legal status and the property right status of the Palestinians under the Palestinian Authority areas A. So we're talking about the cities.
Even in the
So
cities.
even the cities. So even these red dots that you can see
So
on the
let's so
map.
all these red dots are the cities.
Yes.
Okay. Highest population
So
of Palestinian people in the West Bank.
yeah. So even the areas where the villages, a lot of the land has been confiscated very aggressively since October 7, undermining the whole idea of these Oslo Accords because it changed the status of these lands. Um, but even the areas that were supposed to remain under the authority of the Palestinian government, even us, like now in these cities, in these very concentrated Palestinian communities, the legal status of the land has changed, which allows individual settlers to come and actually be able to buy whatever land that exists within the cities. So it completely ends the legal status of not just the legal, legislative, and the property rights that the Palestinian Authority governs within these cities. So what that means is that this is the end of the Oslo Accords. This is the end of the Palestinian existence as we see it. And so as Gaza is going on, we have a very different reality happening as Saturn is culminating in the 29 degrees of Pisces, moving into this exact conjunction.
Wow.
And like speaking to the nature of this government, when this was approved yesterday, like there was the Council of the Settlers, there's a council for the settlements in the West Bank. They were celebrating and saying that now we have the land
Yeah.
that was given to us,
Yeah.
and this is the most important date since Roman times.
Jeez.
So they're just imagining that this is the most important date for them, which was yesterday,
Wow.
since the land was taken from them during the Roman times.
Wow.
And now they celebrate that now we have Israel back. Wow. Like only yesterday, but
Let me highlight the fact that I didn't hear about this. This is not really like the main
it's
thing on the right. So there's a lot of things happening right now that
yes,
as like something else takes for a few weeks center stage, then all these other things start happening
yeah.
and
I
you just
mean,
don't hear about it.
Neptune, right? The hidden, the
So,
distraction, Neptune, the right?
so this is also just sort of the very nature of colonization itself. And the idea of the ethnic cleanse. And I'm glad you said genocide, because we look for genocide as a sort of like kill everyone. It's a very subtle, in many ways covert, in many ways but also in many ways very open and honest intention to ethnically cleanse the population. Now, whether that means there's an agenda to somehow displace more Palestinian people to who knows where, or to end their existence. Like, there's a very strong sense of there are people here that are entitling themselves to take this land and to wipe out the existence of an entire ethnic group so that it's only represented by my ethnic group. So this is a really important thing to understand. Let me just take a moment. So all of the, according to this, this would be Israeli control. It's not really showing you a lot of the, or it is showing you some of the, so there are many, many Israeli settlements, many, 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 many. I guess this map is kind of harder to tell. The lighter red, I think, are the Israeli. I mean, the Israeli settlements are all over the place. It's hard to really
It's like
tell.
mushrooms.
They're
Yeah,
all
it's like
over. Like, and imagine in this, with literally like every half, like everywhere, mycelium, right? So you have Israeli settlements all over the place. And the Israeli settlements are backed and supported by the Israeli government and are even protected by Israeli soldiers.
this.
And with what's happening right now, even though you have a strong population of Palestinian people in the West Bank, their movement is guarded by Israeli soldiers. And now we have this movement toward annexation. So it's just really important to understand what's actually going on right now. And this is all starting as we're approaching the Saturn Neptune. And so, I mean, obviously this sounds very gloom and
Yes.
hopeless. And I'm sure there's more that we can speak to and unpack in this, but this is a very important context. Okay. So
Yeah.
thank you
We have
yeah.
I mean, what I can I think it's also I think it's important also to highlight that when we're like Neptune, we always in Neptune, it's the higher like consciousness, right? We think of it as this like white, with this white thing, this higher ideal that we have, right? And unfortunately, when we talk about politics, spirituality becomes a lot of times religion, right?
Right.
Spirituality
Right.
for most people is how religious is it's religion, and how they interpret these texts. And it's very important to highlight how now all these areas, the very little areas that we had in the Oslo Accords, they're being dissected by these settlers. They're everywhere. Like if I walk 10 minutes from my house, I can see a settlement. So they're just very close. They're just like neighborhoods. But as more land is taken by these individual settlers or as group of settlers, we have them putting banners about a coming Messiah as well.
Mhm.
Messiah. So I mean, what I'm saying is that on the ground over here, it's a very present rhetoric, the way religion is interpreted. Um, Generally speaking, we talked about that within the jihadis and the like political Islam or militant Islam, but it exists similarly among these groups of very young settlers, very young people, where they have this idea of better times or of this physical figure, and but it highlights Neptune being this spiritual thing that people are attached to, this square between Sag, what you believe, and this Neptune, right? Like this tension between what I believe is true and the attempt to like unify this idea or force others to believe in it.
Mm.
So, but it's aligning with this higher ideal. And both, I see Hamas is aligning with a higher ideal, and I see them as well, these settlers aligning with higher ideal.
Yeah.
And the attacks, unfortunate that these attacks are made under the pretext of, well, we're more superior, our religion is more superior, and we have to do this because we're ushering in. better times, whether going back to the map of the Ottomans or whether going back to a different times. Something is in their
Pre-Roman, yeah.
head, and they're aligning themselves with this ideal of Neptune. And as they do that, they commit these atrocities. And it's unfortunate to see this dilemma of, well, I mean, looking objectively and from far, it's like, but dude, you're you're doing atrocities in the name of a very ideal idea. And this is unfortunate, like this distortion of Neptune, right? Like it shows up in many different ways. It shows up in, well, I mean, we're ushering it in this figure, this temple. I mean, Jerusalem is very, very important in this whole conflict. Like it's the thing. It's the curse and it's the blessing. You know, Jerusalem is the curse and it's the
Mm.
blessing in this area. So, I mean, it's very important to highlight this theme in a Saturn Neptune because it's what we see on the ground.
It's so essential.
It's
So, being now in the Aries, or well, not even, I mean, this video is being made still like a few days from Saturn even entering Aries. So all of this is preliminary. I mean, we can see what this is foreshadowing. And it does feel gloom on some degree. I'm sure as Sagittarius, two Sagittarius people, we have some silver lining here, but
yeah.
there's we can't control the waves of Neptune in some regard. But what happens is, Aries really speaks to the mass militarization, like the idealization of my military force, or fighting for this nationalistic, higher cause, higher meaning. And I think what's unfortunate in all of this that I want to really highlight is the more we see any side acting in ways of violence, the more it instills and sort of justifies that sort of national sense of purpose and protection. And if I let my guard down, or if I don't become the dominant force, I'm going to be, and I just want everyone to really internalize, like, this is where arguments happen between two people. Like, things escalate so deeply when we start perceiving the other person innately as a threat, and we have a history to prove it. Like, when you're seeing someone as a threat, what else are you going to do but defend yourself and protect yourself and maybe be stronger and be better? And so we have this whole reality. It's escalated so far. There's an underlying paradigm shift that has to happen beyond this duality and framework that is so entrenched right now. And I think this is where there's a deeper spiritual underlying and prayer that I think is here, that those who are committed to that can hold and cultivate and practice. But I think, oftentimes, you mentioned earlier, like, extreme polarization is often what precedes a deeper unification and healing. So, where do you want to, I would love, if you wanted to look at more slides or share more conversation on this, where do you want to take this right now?
Uh, I'm not sure. Do you have like a question on
Yeah, I
just
mean, I think there's one more slide that would be really useful to look at, and I think this might be really, it may have been the Saturn Neptune opposition. So, like, the
mm,
midpoint between the last conjunction and the current conjunction. This would be very helpful for us to think about. Maybe you can share that slide and talk about what was developing then.
there were three slides that maybe I'll share. There it is.
And I think you have to click the area.
Is that I hope it doesn't go back all the way to the beginning. It
There we
does.
go. This is
So I'm just gonna quickly go to that slide. So that was the exact opposition. It was actually when
the
Hamas
third
took over.
opposition. Yeah.
Yeah, it took over. It's in June 2007 when so they won the elections just previously before that in 2006. And I do present a lot of the context of why that happened, why the corruption that was taking place in the Palestinian Authority. So
In
I
your other
explained
video.
why. I did explain if anybody is more into how that happened and why Hamas won the elections. But this is when they took over Gaza. So as I said, the way they define themselves is such a unified way, and they religion is just it's a theological sort of way of thinking and seeing. And usually when you have a strong theology, either like the settlers that you have in the West Bank or like Hamas, they will not accept any other definition of identity other
Right.
than what they have, because they are the self-righteous one. They are the superior. They are the white, they are the Neptune, and we can have nothing else, just one way of seeing the world through the eyes of God and the way they interpret God and the way they interpret the texts. And we have that even in the United States is now a little bit. And so there had to be their way is the only way. They could not be able to sit down with the Palestinian Authority and talk about this division, fragmentation of identity. So they take Gaza in a form of a coup. It took over several days, and that's the date, and that's the opposition where we have it halfway. Before now,
And
we
can
have
you
this
speak a little bit
cycle.
to like there was a withdrawal, I think, in the very beginning of this opposition, correct? Maybe it was a little before, but leading up to this opposition, Israel withdrew entirely from
Yes.
Gaza,
Yes, yes,
right?
that was in 2005.
Yeah, just in
Do
the
I
beginning of
have
this. Yeah,
do I have a slide? There it is, right? The disengagement
I don't
plan.
see it. It didn't move.
I didn't move for
No,
you. Okay. It seems we need to go back.
there are two. There are probably two screens that you're sharing. Like there's like there. You probably have two different windows that are operating at the same time.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay, there it is. Do you see it now? The
No,
disengagement plan?
no, I don't.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So let me just then there it is.
And so I'll just speak a little bit about that. I mean, um, so
Do you
there are a
see that
lot of
now?
Israelis that were
Is,
living
is
in
it,
Gaza at that point, and there's
do
a
you
lot
see
of
it?
pressure. There we go. Now we can see. There's a lot of pressure, global political pressure for Israel to withdraw from Gaza entirely. So that's something that happened. Yeah, this is the beginning, the approaching of that opposition.
Yes. So there was this disengagement plan. So they just withdrew from Gaza. They dismantled the settlements that was under the Prime Minister Sharon. And so they withdrew, like they dismantled the settlements inside Gaza. They left Gaza, and so the settlers, you can see them arguing now with the soldiers who were implementing the decision of the government. And so it's a unilateral decision that took place, and they besieged Gaza after that. So that was the date that the siege of Gaza began, to like August 2005, but it became more and more strict with time. Like in 2006, when Hamas won, it became more strict. The siege became more strict, and then more
What do
and
you mean by
more.
impose a siege? What does that mean?
It means Gaza is separate from the West Bank, so it's completely closed with fences. You cannot
Got it.
leave or enter the Gaza without going through a checkpoint, without
So
being checked by
that's what you mean by
Hamas.
a siege. Okay.
Yes, because if you leave the strip, you need to enter Israel. So you cannot enter Israel without going through the security checks. And so you have to go through an Israeli military checkpoint or even military base to enter Israel. And so they have to allow you that in order to travel somewhere else. And so this is why they go through Egypt, because they're besieged, they cannot enter through Israel.
Got it.
And so we don't literally, we cannot go to Gaza. Similarly for us, we cannot cross Israel and go to Gaza.
Right.
And so, but it's important to understand that even this disengagement plan, even within the Israeli government, when they took this unilateral decision, it was with the intention of disrupting the peace process from going on. So this was in the documents as this decision was taking place, is that this is the really best way to stop the peace process from going forward, and therefore us having a Palestinian state. So this was a way of keeping the division in place between the West Bank and Gaza, and between these two definitions, the Palestinian Authority that is more national,
Mm.
multi-ethnic and multi-religious, and Hamas, which has this view of, well, we can only our life revolves around mainly religion.
Right.
which doesn't mean, I mean, there are many Christians in Gaza. They can live there. They respect, because Islam respects Christianity very, very much. But still, religion has to be the core theme around which life revolves around. And you can see that a lot in the Palestinian society, even if you come and visit just as a visitor. It's a
And
very
so from this
strong.
point on, Hamas basically took full power and control in Gaza.
Yes. In 2006, they won the elections. And then in 2007, there was the coup, and they completely took control, and they separated from they completely became separated. And so Palestinians became had two governments representing us. And so now the Israelis, under the pretext, where do we negotiate? We don't have anybody to negotiate with. Maybe you've heard that on the news.
Yeah.
Do we negotiate with the Palestinian authorities, or do we negotiate with Hamas? Let them figure out their own stuff, and then we negotiate with one representative. So that was a very sort of one way of how divide and conquer, this mentality of, well, I mean, it existed even before recent colonial
And
times.
again, this really further purports a perspective that there's a sort of political agenda in Hamas ultimately coming to power, because if we have a very small area of land that is highly radicalized, it's under a very radicalized rule, an incredibly diverse population, mind you, incredibly diverse population, not a radicalized population, but under a very radicalized rule, then that justifies ongoing border protection, ongoing control,
Yes.
to the point where we have what's happened in Gaza over the past few years. And I hope that this provides some larger context or perspective. I'm under the personal view, just with what I know, and also if you kind of hear Israeli soldiers that were actually on guard, guarding the Gazan borders, they were actually told to stand down that morning. I think there's a lot of political motive for the Israeli government to have enabled and wanted something like October 7th to happen, as sick as that sounds, in order to justify what they were then able to do to Gaza, which again, what's happening now, and it's not front lines in the news, there is still a lot of violence, and it's not like things are great now. But what's sort of happening undercurrent is, with the support of the Trump administration, there is movement towards a basic total takeover of Gaza by the Israeli government with the support of Trump, making it like the next Dubai or something crazy like that. So these are, again, these are hidden processes that are sort of happening, that aren't necessarily headlines right now.
Yeah. Yes, yes. I mean, unfortunately, the Trump administration helps in the deception process, where he says we will not allow the annexation of the West Bank.
It's not
The
true.
annexation of the West Bank is taking place
Yeah,
literally on the
he's
ground
and
on Gaza
Trump
now.
is deeply allied with people that are,
Yeah.
wanting it's a total deception, which is
Yeah.
his middle name is deception.
Yeah.
So
And yeah, I just want to say
yes,
that,
please.
as you see, like midway through that, we have
Yeah.
this Gaza situation, and now in this recent conjunction, we have this very unfortunate situation where not just Gaza is completely destroyed, but a huge part of the West Bank is being destroyed. I mean, we have complete refugee camps. All the refugee camps around the cities and in the cities are being slowly destroyed. I mean, we have one refugee camp in the Jenin city area where it's like Gaza. It's like with 45,000 refugees in it,
And then and then where do they all
displaced,
go?
like all over, and to the villages, to the city itself. They're renting places, they're going places, they're being dispersed in other into the other communities, into the other areas. And we have a crisis of what do we do? We do have a humanitarian crisis. We're as a result of these constant demolishing of houses and neighborhoods, complete neighborhoods in the West Bank. The refugee camps inside the West Bank are being targeted in the same way that the Gaza Strip is being targeted. but they're not using airplanes. They're using less obvious.
Right, and it's like the pretext of we had to demolish these buildings because there was a terrorist operation happening there, things like that, right?
It's a policy. It's a clear policy now
Yeah,
where we need like the Jenin area. They annexed that part of the land.
yeah,
It like like the uh, in Neptune Saturn Neptune conjunction. There's a word we use, the dissolving of borders.
yeah,
So literally,
yeah.
as one side is dissolving border and expanding, we have the other side being squeezed, which is the
Mm,
Palestinians.
mm.
So the border here is being of Israel is being expanded, and so the refugee, for example, the Jenin refugee camp is being completely annexed. That part is being completely annexed inside Israel. Like the land is gone, and so there's another refugee camp near Tulkarem as well, where it's literally the people they go into the city up on the hill and they watch their apartments and apartment buildings being demolished, and they're watching that.
Wow.
Um, and that has been it's repeating in they began up towards the north, and it's
Slowly
the
moving
plan
south.
to continue more and more and more. And so we're being like the borders are being expanded, dissolved, and expanded in one area, and other groups were being squeezed more and more and more into more limited neighborhoods.
That's a part of the strategy. So people are being
Yeah.
pushed to kind of move further and further south. You've spoken in the past that you're in Ramallah, which is somewhat of a. I mean, it's like it's one of the bigger cities.
Yeah.
So you've described it to me as like somewhat of a bubble.
Yes.
But what is it like for you in Ramallah? Um, in the larger context of what's happening in the West Bank, like what is a lived on the ground experience for people in Ramallah right now?
The people, I mean, every day we wake up. Do you want me to change the slide and maybe go to
Oh,
the
sure.
slide? Um, we probably should have, it doesn't change, does it, like this way? Mm, I'll stop sharing maybe. So, I mean, yeah, I'll try and share just for you to, there it is, I guess.
The map again, yeah.
Yeah, that map again. So every day we wake up on a different news. And so, for example, when we had the news about the decisions that were approved yesterday, we do practice a very strong sense of disassociation because that's the only way we can survive.
Yeah.
So we wake up and we do whatever we need to do, trying not to think about the very ultimate danger that we are in. And Ramallah, when you come here, Ramallah is very famous for the many restaurants.
Mm.
And so people are just sitting, hanging around, you would think you were in a different place. But yet we do talk about when we have decisions like what happened yesterday, you do sense the tension in the street. And even if we are in restaurants, you do sense the tension of what's going to happen to us. So it's a form of life where we have a strong disassociation, even, state of psychosis where we have, because the danger is so near. So it becomes not just disassociation, it becomes a little bit more like it's crazy. But then the nervous system and our level of fear is really, really, it's felt like the electricity of Uranus. It's the Uranian element is very much felt because we can wake up and we don't know what's going to happen. We can wake up and we have a totally new reality in front of us. Like, unfortunately, Palestinians are used to that. That's part of what I got used to as I grew up in this place, but it has never been so unsecure. It
Right.
has never been at this level of insecurity and danger. I mean, to the extent that people are actually searching for other places to go and live. Like many people are searching for places
Right.
to
And
leave the land.
you mentioned to me once like there's also like a group of people that will never leave, right? It's like
There's
which
always,
which is
there's always,
understandable, right? It's like this is my home. I mean, anyone can understand that. Like there's a natural affinity. This is my place. This is my land. This is my grandfather's land. This is just like,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
there are a lot of people that, are just going to stick with it, and
A,
it's
a
their
lot of people.
identity.
It's part of the mentality of the Palestinians. We understand very much that this is an existential sort
Mm,
of, unfortunately, a conflict. It's a demographic issue. Um, Literally. I mean, the reason why we have what we have now is because we have 7 million Israelis and 7 million Palestinians prior to October 7. And so I mean, one reason for war is demographic change and control. And this is why we have Pisces, the migration of refugees. It's the change of
yeah,
the demography on the ground. That's very much a very political issue. And so
it's
we
very true.
understand that. Even when I was a very young girl in the First Intifada, we talk about and we understand the struggle, the conflict, and we understand the fear of the Israelis. We understand very well. I mean, we are highly politicized community because we have to. And therefore, we understand that we need to exist. And that's the ultimate thing that we need to do is to attach to the land. And so you have people that this is the sumud
I was wondering
mentality,
whether,
which
yeah,
is, yeah,
yeah.
it's
You
like
wrote a great
the,
article. I'll post a link to your article on that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the mentality of being like the roots of an olive tree. The roots of an
Mm,
olive tree are so dug
deeply.
deep under the
Hmm.
ground that doesn't it's very difficult to uproot the olive tree. And so this is the Sumud mentality where we have to stay rooted into this land because this is how we ultimately fight this form of, unfortunately, of this part of history. This is how we defeat it if we want to. And this is why we have what we have in Gaza. This is why we have what we have in the West Bank. And I'm afraid that in the coming cycle of Saturn Neptune, it's becoming very, very difficult for us to stay rooted. We're being very much squeezed out of this land. And many of the tools that we had and we used, international tools, even the judicial system under occupation, which is a military judicial system, even that is being disrupted by the Israeli government. It's no longer
Yeah.
useful. I mean, it has never done justice to us. Always, it always, the rules were in favor of the military and everything, but still, we had that tool to fight a decision of demolition, or we had tools to fight or delay. Now we no longer have that. Even the imprisonment system is
Mm,
horrible. Like the situation is
yeah.
horrible. Like I don't want to like I can speak a lot to that, but I mean we all of the tools that we have we're being deprived of, and I mean I'm not very hopeful, but still we have the sextile with
Pluto,
Uranus.
Uranus.
We
Well,
have
what's interesting in
we have
'89 there
this
was that
trine
Uranus.
with Pluto, so maybe we have I don't know some
Well,
divine intervention that plays
let's
in
let's
our
start
favor.
let's start bringing this together with some closing thoughts, because we
Yes.
have, in '89, we had that conjunction, and
Yeah.
Uranus was there too. So it was a Saturn Neptune Uranus, which is profound, right?
Yeah.
We can say we're at the next phase, like Saturn and Neptune are together, and Uranus is now sextile, and Pluto is I mean, this is like the 2026 transits are kind of unlike anything we'll ever see, because we have a stream of sextiles with all of the outer planets: Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn involved, and even Jupiter involved for a moment. I think I think this, on one hand, provides and reflects some sort of greater collective archetypal knowledge. Like maybe we can see more of the Uranian bird's eye view patterns. Like we can kind of understand we have enough context to observe and see what's playing out. And I think also there's an increase of knowledge and education, a very air energy. There's more knowledge, meaning there's something that is a little less isolating this time around, right? But I'm curious to hear if you want to share this, if this feels relevant. with what feels like a sort of and this is, true in Palestine as much as I feel like this is a thing in the world right now. With the approach of Saturn Neptune, we're not even there yet, right? But we sort of feel what almost is like an inevitability, like things are happening. Like, it can easily feel defeating, hopeless. Like, what can you do about it? And I've spoken on my channel here about my own personal reflection on like what's a deeper spiritual orientation around this. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts around this, like any insight. Also, like as a Palestinian person, how do you internalize and meet this moment? How do you understand this in the larger context of a spiritual unfolding? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts.
Oh, um, it's very challenging.
Yeah.
So your first question was how, so you had two questions. What was the first one?
Well, you can kind of take it how you want to. It's all one question. It's just like, what what do you do about this? Like how do you, while this can feel despairing and hopeless because there's a sort of inevitability to what's happening and like you can't control the waves of Neptune, um,
Yeah.
how would you, whether you want to speak personally or just abstractly, how do you or how does one meet this moment, and in particular being a Palestinian? And what do you see amongst Palestinian people? Like how is this moment met without either like a false hope, right? But
Yeah.
there's a sort of realism here. But where is the silver lining? Like where's meaning? Where's purpose in
Yeah.
this? You know?
Yeah. So I want to say something before I
Please.
address this final the silver lining, if there is. I mean, I'll try and speak to something, but I want to highlight also an important like reality as well, like back to the sort of like the news or the reality before we sort of um finalize this is we are seeing a culmination to one conflict, and we can speak about how, as Palestinians, we can think about that. So we are seeing the conflict between Israel and Palestine in the coming cycle resolved in a way that in our disadvantage as Palestinians, because we're being squeezed into very small communities that almost will have no civil, um, maybe no civil rights as well as no political rights. So we are looking into a situation we're heading towards that. So as the cycle seems to be closing in that direction, we're also having the beginnings of a, a larger conflict starting, which is the conflict between Israel and
Oh,
the Arab world. So we have the Israeli-Palestinian conflict seemingly coming to an end, not in a just way,
yeah.
in an unjust way, and that's part of the Neptune. Um, it's if it's bound to happen, it's bound to happen. We're not the first. We're not the first culture to be wiped out of existence on a land, right? Like we have a lot of that. Like we have that in Latin America, we have that in Australia, we have that in the United States. Like we're not the first, and we're not going to be the last group of people to be wiped off of a geographical area or squeezed out of it. That's one way to look at it. If it's inevitable, it's inevitable. We have to surrender to whatever larger context there is. But we have the beginning of an Arab-Israeli conflict.
Hmm.
As borders are being expanded towards the north, the Golan Heights into Syria. So the Israeli army is going all the way until the borders of Damascus sometimes, the same way into Lebanon. So the northern part of Israel, to the north of Israel, we have Syria and Lebanon. And so we have the Israeli-Arab conflict beginning with this coming cycle. So in the next 36 years, we're going to hear more of that conflict. And this is an overexhaustion in one way. This is not a good resolution also to the Israelis when you have elements of a larger conflict beginning. This is very this is how empires sort of When they overextend, they overexhaust. It's
Yeah.
one element, Israel, I mean, they do dream, like the Israeli government do dream to become an empire, but even if they align themselves with an American empire, we do have an element of exhaustion in the overextension. So I don't know if that's a silver lining or not, but that's just a reality that is unfolding in this cycle that is coming. Now, as for us, Palestinians, surrender is a big part of our identity as well. Surrendering. And it's part of the whole Neptune archetype. Because we're used to situations where we're overwhelmed with force. I mean, we had the invasion, for example, in 2002, where the Israeli army invaded all of our cities and we felt absolutely hopeless. Also, when there was the Iraq war back then, we felt absolutely hopeless. So we have these cycles of hopelessness permeating throughout the whole of our history. And so we do surrender into God's hands. That's part of the religious identity as well, where religion, at least Islam, is very strong into the idea or theology of surrendering. In the word Islam, the verb Islam, the
Yeah.
verb means surrender.
Really?
So Islam is the noun, but if you take that into the verb salim is to surrender. So it's a
And
very
what does
strong.
inshallah mean? Also, like inshallah, doesn't that mean like if God wills it or something like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I hear that word all the
yeah.
time. Inshallah.
Yes, inshallah, exactly. It's like, yeah, we use it all the time as well.
Oh.
So there's a strong element of surrender. So we do have that in our culture, and this is how we hold ourselves. It's like if it's God's will, it's God's will. But whatever is going to happen, it's going to happen, and we try and stay focused into that, and just hopeful, I guess. And
I want to share something because you
yeah,
speak about the growing Arab-Israeli conflict beyond just Palestine, Israel. And it's something we need to understand if we're understanding that the government itself is highly influenced or even motivated by the right-wing nationalists. We have to understand, and this is not being spoken publicly, but like what's their goal. So I'm going to share a map right now of the biblical borders of Israel.
yes.
So I was trying to find a map that kind of
You can find better ones, I guess. But yeah,
better
that's
ones. Yeah, because I want to highlight what the current borders are. So it's like
yeah.
the current borders. You can help me out here. It's like here's the Jordan River. So it's like here,
Yeah, do you see that there's a lake there? The border is at the moment, it's where the lake
right here,
is.
right here.
Yes.
Yeah,
So the expansion, the red line behind the lake is the expansion.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
all of
the
this
river is the
area.
border now, but they're dreaming of expanding all the way to where the red lines are.
So
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
includes this literally includes if we can maybe see
There's a different,
there's
yeah, yeah.
there are better maps out there that
Yeah.
highlight it over the existing template of here. This one's interesting. I think this one maybe it's a little bit too messy.
If you put,
No,
it's not it's there it is. There's a one with the amazing map. There it is. Do you see it? Yeah, that one.
got it. There you go. It shows the overlay of the
Yeah.
actual countries.
Yes.
Wait, that feels bigger than what I would expect. 1 second. Okay, that's not showing it to me. I'll just do it here. So okay, Israel right here is there. We go. Is Israel? Okay,
Yes.
I'm not familiar personally with this border. Like I
This is
actually
the
don't know what
biblical
that's based on.
border.
I
These are
I'm
the
not.
biblical borders. And it doesn't have to be that because they consider that if you have a government that is in peace process with it, that would mean that the border is there already. But if it goes through Syria and it goes all the way to
That's the point.
Iraq.
So Syria,
Yeah, that's
Lebanon, Saudi Arabia. I've actually never seen it go this far, so this is a little bit new for me. I mean, throughout history, it probably depends on who you ask. Israel has
yeah,
had different borders at different times, so there might be different opinions around like what is the official intended, God intended biblical
exactly.
border, right? This is
Yeah,
bigger
I
than
don't.
anything I've ever seen, so I wonder what this is historically based on. But yeah,
Um, I mean, probably the current Israeli government doesn't know where it's going to stop, But the idea is that they're expanding towards the neighboring countries, and it's not over yet. Like they do tend to expand, and within the next cycle of Saturn Neptune, the borders can be changed.
Yeah. So this is what
And
I'm more
then,
familiar with.
yeah,
But I think the point that I want to make is like the expansionist mentality of Israel means there's a direct conflict with existing Arab countries, and that's the point here. It's like this is expanding, typical colonialist orientation. It's expanding beyond just Palestine, Israel, and I think this is something we're going to be seeing more of
yes,
in the
yes.
Saturn Neptune, inevitably in the Saturn Neptune cycle. Something to really pay attention to.
And it's not, I mean, even if we think of the borders that we saw just right now, the red borders,
Uh huh.
it's like they're expanding into the neighborhoods, but like their backs is exposed because the area, like, it's not closed borders. It's half of Syria and half of Lebanon.
Right.
So it's very difficult to go all the way, like to occupy all of Syria. It's also impossible. It's almost impossible. It's only the Golan Heights. But expanding the conflict there militarily and the occupation there, that's that's having their backs exposed for the rest of the Middle East.
Wow.
And so that's not a very hopeful view of the future from my perspective. And so I'm not saying that that's going to take place. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know. Right now, the borders have already expanded into
You already
all the
have.
way the borders of Damascus even and the southern of Lebanon. Like yesterday, they infiltrated and they kidnapped a jihadist leader from southern Lebanon, the Israeli soldiers. So they went into Lebanon, kidnapped an activist, and arrested him into Israel. So we're having this, we're gonna listen more, hear more and more of this kind of Arab-Israeli
Yeah.
conflict. Like that's what I can say about that. Yeah.
I'll say too, and it is hard to know exactly where this is going because I think there's always the element of the miracle and where we don't really know how this will unfold, but we can read the patterns. And I always like to emphasize like these kinds of, as a Jew who's lived in Israel, who has family in Israel, right? Like just the fact that I get to have a friendship with you and share these conversations, like layered. I mean, it's one of the most meaningful things in my life. And I've gotten so much out of our conversation. I've learned so much from you. And I think it's this right there where there's a bridge, where there's a connection, where there's a humanization. When I first met you, it was exciting to hear that there was an evolutionary astrologer living in Ramallah. Like that's too familiar to me. That's too human. Like what? What? Like I'm an evolutionary. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's that humanization of one another that is so essential and so important. Whereas the Saturn Neptune Aries wants to be divided and defended and protected and on guard. And we need to really actively work on those places where we're tempted and told to be in that place of defense and fear, and actually recognize that that's just a dissolving of a false boundary. And I think that's where a lot of the healing, and who knows where that takes us, who knows where the ultimate movement of that is.
Yeah. Um, as I said, I mean, this animosity is doubled down by this separation where people are not meeting anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe with the fatigue of war, the fatigue of the conflict and this bloodshed, maybe there will be a need for spaces, where we can meet. I mean, you and I, we share a vision that it's not possible, but it's only possible if here in Israel, or like the normal people are meeting the normal people and not just the
Mm-hmm.
politicians, like sitting down and speaking the way it used to be, even under occupation, where there were moments, even brief moments, where I was able to see beyond the uniform and he was able to see beyond what he feared, what he
Yeah.
thought of as a terrorist, where he saw an old man like his father, or where he saw a young baby like his son, and
Hey.
that these moments of humanization, hopefully, these moments become necessary after bloodshed. I guess they become absolutely necessary. So
Yeah.
that's, I guess, my hope.
Yeah. And we both share, like, we both have this perspective that ultimately the real solution won't be this like two state. Because the whole notion of a two state basically still says separation is the key, and the extremist orientations won't actually ever settle for that because there are too many people that want it all for themselves. It's only where we get beyond that mentality of me versus you, and we actually learn, like, what is it like to live here, where my idea of my identity isn't to the exclusion of yours, where it's not like I have my place for my people. I think the whole idea of a nation state is inherently a violent idea, and it creates a lot of problems. Even though we want to idealize it as like giving a people a state, it's actually a part of the larger problem. States shouldn't be nationalized according to an identity or ethnicity. Ultimately, we have to go through this process, and we're here for. I mean,
The
this
process
is a
of,
part of the journey that we're in right
yeah,
now. Diana,
yes.
thank you so much for all of this conversation. Once again, I'm going to post the links where you kind of gave much more of a thorough analysis of two different dimensions. I really hope this was helpful, insightful, and useful for those watching. Again, please feel free to ask questions. I'm assuming you're happy to engage. I didn't actually
Yes,
ask you.
yes,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. Yes. Thank you very much
Um,
for having me. I really appreciate it. And to have this space where the Palestinian voices are not heard a lot. And so I appreciate that very, very much.
oh, good.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. And everyone, thank you so much for watching.